Hello there, men, and welcome to the Masculinism Movement channel, a place for men to be men and to talk about masculinity and men's issues. I'm your host, Brian Krall, and today I'm going to be talking about the concept of the gentleman and being a gentleman. The concept of the gentleman is an interesting and paradoxical one. It's somewhat abstract and hard to reach a consensus about what exactly it is. Different people seem to have different definitions of it, which are, of course, suited to their individual self-interests. So this term gets used much in the same way as the term real man that I addressed a couple videos ago. Women will talk about what a gentleman is or is supposed to be or does or is supposed to do for them in order to manipulate men into conformity to their wishes, such as being more agreeable and treating them to fancy restaurants and such. Men will refer to themselves as gentlemen when they are proud of certain characteristics that they have that they see as noble and wish to present to others, hoping that they will see them as noble as well. The ideas coming from these respective people, however, will not be exactly the same, because the concept of the gentleman is not universal or absolute, but in essence, this term is a generic idea that is meant to serve as an example of what is considered to be generally good male behavior. Not necessarily a good man, mind you, but a man who behaves well. The term is literally gentle man, or a man who is gentle, a man who is the opposite of a savage or brute. But what does this term really mean exactly? Well, in order to speak about the gentleman in a way that will clear up any confusion, first let us consult with the definition and origins of the term. Dictionary.com defines the term as a noun, a man of good family, breeding, or social position. It could be used in a polite term for a man, such as, do you know that gentleman over there? A civilized, educated, sensitive, or well-mannered man. A male personal servant, especially of a man of social position. A valet, a male attendant upon a king, queen, or other royal person who is himself of high birth or rank. And Merriam-Webster defines it as a man of noble or gentle birth, and that word gentle meaning belonging to a family of high social station. Or a man belonging to the landed gentry, and gentry, which is where the word gentle comes from, refers to an upper or ruling class or an aristocracy. And a man who combines gentle birth or rank with chivalrous qualities. A man whose conduct conforms to a high standard of propriety or correct behavior. A man of independent means who does not engage in any occupation or profession for gain. So basically, a venture capitalist or, a wealthy landowner who doesn't have to work but can live off of investments. And lastly, a man who does not engage in a menial occupation or in manual labor for gain. And the term comes from the term gentry, as I mentioned, which is a British land-owning class, basically noblemen. So the gentleman was originally a type of nobleman in older times, but eventually that term just came to mean classy and noble and other such things. And the word later came to be synonymous with sophistication and respectability and other great qualities that many men wish to attain. So being a gentleman is certainly supposed to be a good thing, and usually is. However, unfortunately, this term is not only used to connote classy and noble men, but it is used to manipulate men into being more passive and less sexual and more submissive. You will often hear women telling a man how he should be a gentleman by doing things for her, such as being courteous, chivalrous, helpful, protective, and generous, without expecting anything sexual in return. Basically, she's trying to manipulate him into a role of submission and servitude to her. I've also heard men use the same phrase about themselves to describe things and how they would take a woman out, court her, and show her a great time without making a single sexual move, and act as though in doing so, they are somehow being, a great man. Or when a man tells another to be a gentleman, when he means, don't try to fuck the girl I'm interested in. Kind of like how women use the word slut with each other to shame them out of fucking the guy they want. This is, of course, a bastardization of the concept of being a sophisticated and classy nobleman worthy of others' respect. But this is what happens when sexuality and female manipulation get involved in social dynamics. And when women are being manipulative, They will often try to change the meaning of words. So this is how you will hear the word gentleman being used in a different way when hearing women and beta male providers trapped in the friend zone talk about being one. However, traditionally, due to their status, class, social etiquette, charm, image, and of course money, traditionally, gentlemen were generally quite successful with women. In fact, many of them were master seducers. Just think about classic gentlemen such as Frank Sinatra and the Rat Pack. These men were certainly not afraid to get sexual with the girls they wanted. Rather the opposite. And they usually did far better in dating than others. I wrote about this extensively in my article on the seductive personality types. If you want to read more about them, you can do so in the link below. But this is not a dating and sex ed channel. So moving on. You can see that classically the idea of being a gentleman was a very good one. It was a great thing for a man to be and was seen as a sort of model image for a man. And it had much more to do with a man than just his dating life, which it seems to have been reduced to today. It was, however, still largely about his social life, especially in the sense that the term was used to describe where he was on the social hierarchy and what type of man you could expect him to be socially with you. And so one problem with men identifying with this term is that it still has too much to do with other people to be considered your core identity, since your core identity should exist independently of other people, right? It should only be about you and no one else. I'll get into this more in my video on identity in the future, but for now, I hope you can understand that your sense of self shouldn't be about other people, all right? You should have your own independent identity. And being a gentleman is more about how you relate to others, so it should not be considered your core identity. If you were to consider yourself a gentleman, that should only be one facet of your character, a persona that you have developed on top of your core identity. If you're enjoying listening to what I have to say, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you feel I'm adding value to your life, you can also tip me at the PayPal link below in proportion to the amount of value added. Your support will help me be able to continue this work because the oppressive fascists at YouTube are against this kind of content and actively trying to suppress it. So it is only with the help of viewers like you that I'll be able to keep fighting the good fight against the evil fucking matriarchy. Another issue that arises with the concept of being a gentleman is where the idea of the gentleman could actually also be a political power play used to control men, right? From the fact that it is essentially telling them to be gentle, to avoid shows of strength, power, brute force, and physical violence, etc. And these are things that are necessary if you want to be able to stand up for yourself and do things such as elevating your status. All right, but you see, originally, the gentlemen from the gentry were the lowest class of noblemen. So the term was basically kind of like a suppressor. It was like telling the lowest class of landowning men to be passive, not aggressive. All right, don't rise up against them. Stay down there and tend to your lands and be nice. While the authorities are the ones who aren't so gentle. They have no problem using their army to sedate the population. So being a gentleman may not actually be all that it's cracked up to be, and has some hidden fatal flaws to it under certain circumstances in which it actually weakens and limits a man's outcome in situations with certain women or more dominant and authoritative men. And the term can always be used to manipulate men by those certain women or those men, or of course, even beta males these days who will try to tell you that being a friend-zoned incel who still provides for women without getting laid has some sort of honor to it, when it's actually just a really sad and pathetic way to live. You shouldn't want to be calling yourself a gentleman as an excuse for being weak and allowing others to control and coerce you and limit your sexual options. However, the classic gentleman does have many great traits that are still worthy of admiration and would oftentimes earn him great prestige. Up until recent times, almost every single successful businessman out there, socialite and playboy or ladies' man, was so because they were this type of man, the type you could call a gentleman. And if when we use the term gentle, we mean kind and compassionate and peaceful, well, we certainly need more people like that in the world. For if everyone was, then there would be no war or violence, right? And we could all live in peace and harmony, perhaps a utopia even. You just do not want to be weak and unable to protect yourself or your family and friends if need be. For what good is being a gentleman then? But there's no reason that a gentleman can't practice self-defense. They just shouldn't be a bully or engage in other sorts of brutish behavior, for these things are not good for the community and thus any socialite wouldn't practice such behaviors, gentlemen or not. They are low-class behaviors that only low-status people and criminal class commit. The unsophisticated and uncivilized brutes, savages, and thugs of society who do not know any manners. But a traditional gentleman would, of course, be expected to try to protect his family from one of these brutish thugs were they to attempt to rob or assault him or his family, and perhaps even be able to teach them some manners. Because a gentleman, though gentle, is still a man, and thus is expected to be masculine. For masculinity is strong, and depending upon your culture, gentlemen could even be a bit macho. Though there are some more feminine gentlemen out there as well, such as dandies, but the term gentleman was often seen to represent a sort of masculine ideal, and thus a symbol of masculinity for many people, an archetype, if you will. For instance, the Southern American gentleman or the old-fashioned English gentleman are character types of great import to those people in the culture they come from. This masculine ideal is emulated because it shows that the person has not just social standing, but great character with many positive personality traits that others enjoy being in the presence of. And while you as a man should certainly be good to others in general, you just don't want to get caught up in the narcissism of living for others and their validation, which seems to be an easy trap to fall into if you fancy yourself a gentleman, as I'm sure happens with many of these men. So, to be or not to be a gentleman, that is the question, and that is up to you. I'm not here to teach you to be one or how to be one or tell you not to be, because I don't feel I can either recommend or discourage it. It could certainly be a beneficial way to act in social and professional situations. It can be a positive persona to have on top of your core identity to conjure up when relating to others. Just don't let society manipulate you with cultural ideas of what a man ought to be and do for them that are actually just self-sacrificing, putting you in a position of servitude or stifling you. You always should consider whether your messaging that you are getting from the social narratives and social conditioning that you are subjected to is empowering or disempowering you. And you shouldn't be conforming to anything that disempowers or stifles you. You should be standing up against it. And it's a great idea to be gentle, kind, and caring to people who are the same way with you. That would be mutually beneficial, right, for you to do so in relation to. But if anyone is ever behaving in opposite ways towards you, you need to be able to meet them with strength and even force if necessary. That is a very important aspect of masculinity, and a thing a man needs to be able to do for himself. It's good to be a good man, but you have to be good to yourself and think about your own personal self-interest before you go giving value to people who may just try to exploit you, which is exactly what many people in society will do to you as a gentleman, especially women, and authorities like the government and some other high-status males who are higher on the dominance hierarchy and don't mind asserting their dominance in ways that are not very nice. And you should not be nice to someone who isn't nice to you. You don't have to do what is right for someone who isn't doing what is right for you. You don't even have to be polite to someone who isn't polite with you, though that will often help diffuse a situation instead of escalating it. But when a situation is escalating and you can't de-escalate it through niceness, then assertiveness is the next virtue a man needs. When you think about being a good man or a gentleman, that should mean developing character strengths that are good for you and sometimes others, but never others at the expense of yourself. Being a gentleman is not a virtue if by gentle it means weak, powerless, and vulnerable to assaults on your character and well-being. As a man, you must be strong. Calling yourself a gentleman because you are weak and aversive to violence and thus unable to defend yourself and are constantly vulnerable to attack and being victimized is a fallacy. Being weak and cowardly is not the same as being a peaceful, pacifist, and gentle man. There's nothing noble about letting yourself get walked all over by others or assaulted, or letting your family and friends get assaulted either. A man needs to be strong enough to be able to protect and defend himself and his loved ones. So it's better to be active and even aggressive than passive. And there are certainly many situations that will arise in your life in which it is better to be forceful and even violent than gentle. And that is just something we men need to do at times in the world we live in, because not everyone is good like gentlemen are, and the good have to be able to stand up for themselves and fight against bad people. So a gentleman should be able to do that as well, if he is in fact a good man. So in conclusion, If you want to be a gentleman for social or professional purposes, that's fine, but just make sure you can still fight for your rights when you need to, because we are living in an era where there is a war on men. So you do need to be able to fight for your rights, lest they be taken away. And just watch out for people who try to use the word gentleman manipulatively to try to get you to stand down and do what they want and behave more gently. And when they do, don't conform. Stand up for yourself and speak out against them. Tell them that they don't get to define what a gentleman is, what he does, or use that term to try to control others. And that a gentleman isn't just a weak beta male provider. A gentleman is a symbol of sophistication and respectability.
That concludes this video. Thanks for listening. I hope I mansplained that good enough for you. If you like what you heard, please click the like button. And if you feel you gained some value from this video and would like to give some back, please do so with the PayPal link below, because your support helps fund me doing this work and fight the good fight for men like you. If you are ready to take the red pill and wake up from the matrix and the matriarchy controlling it and learn everything you need to know about female on male sexism, get your copy of my newly released book called Misandry Exposed. On sale now for a special price that won't last long. So check it out by clicking the link below. And otherwise, take care of yourselves, men, because no woman out there is going to.